So, the big one. Deep canvassing and recruitment. Howie said, do more listening than preaching. And that's extraordinarily important, right? But deep canvassing is about having long, repeated conversations to build trust and relationships. And it may eventually, it's a path to eventually shifting their opinions. There's research shows that door-to-door canvassing, as we do it now, right, where the politicians just show up and they talk at you, or in my case, they get thrown off my porch. I'm literally labeled in the Democrats' van database as hostile husband on my wife's account because I've thrown them off my porch. But there's no effect on that. Almost nearly zero effect on voting choices. Knocking on doors and preaching at people is not changing people's minds. But other studies have shown that having deep conversations where we're listening have much, much, much more impact. And one study showed that 10-minute conversations could reduce transphobia, right? But you got to have the hard conversation and not just go out there and say trans rights are human rights. If you don't agree, you're a transphobe. You're not changing anyone's mind when you do that, right? You have to have these conversations. And deep canvassing is far more effective than any other type of political outreach. Flyers, mailers, speeches, rallies, yard signs. Yard signs are the quintessential political tool, but research shows they have zero impact. They don't change people's minds. They don't get you votes. What they do is make your current supporters feel like they're doing something and like they got something for their support, right? You give them the yard sign, they put it in their yard, and they say, look, I'm supporting a candidate. Not really, but it makes them feel better, right? And it makes them feel like they got a sign out of their support. The Australian Greens engaged in deep canvassing before for a couple years before their most recent election, and they saw massive gains, right? They saw huge gains, like I think 2 to 4 times as many people elected to their national legislature, right? As a result of doing this deep canvassing. And it's because they went out into their community as Greens and they had the hard conversations and they moved people. Tips on deep canvassing: it's got to be more than one encounter, right? Repeated contacts, check-ins. And this is why when people ask me, I say start with your neighbor, right? I talk to my neighbor probably every few days when we happen across each other outside. Those are valuable touches that build our relationship, right? Even in the times when we don't get into something, that's important, when it's just talking about how he loves watching my toddler run around the yard, right? And grow up, right? That builds our relationship, which is really the underlying thing that we need to have, to get these changed. And this means we got to start early, and it's got to be 24/7, 365, right? We can't just start. If you're working for a campaign right in 2022, right now, it's too late and not right. It's not worth it to start deep canvassing almost, because you've got a little over a month, right? It is not enough time to build the relationships you need. It's listen, right? Listen to concerns and try to relate those concerns to your platform, right? Don't ask leading questions. Don't try to, force them into a position. Listen, right? I often tell people that as organizers, our job is to make connections as people talk about things, right? So one of my examples that I used today, actually talking to someone online, another Green in Illinois, if I'm talking to someone in my town and they complain about the quality of the roads or the sidewalks, I immediately can talk to them about, well, are you aware of the situation with the city's budget, where Public Works and the police department each put in approximately the same budget request every year? The police department gets 99.9% of their request, and Public Works gets 30% in 2022 at least. Your roads suck because we are over-investing in authoritarian policing policies, right? These two things are directly connected because they compete for funding in the city. So by hearing these things, I can redirect them to to the larger questions to the larger underlying systemic and structural problems, right? When Garrett hears someone talking, about the smell and the new smell they're smelling in town, he's got the knowledge to say that's the new plastics factory. Did you know they're going to build 3 more? Right? And you can make those connections. And, did you know if you can smell it, it's probably more than smell. It's probably it's pollution and it's damaging, right? So we can take their local, their specific interests and help make the connections to bigger things, right? And then as we build these conversations, as we build these relationships, we can start to make asks, right? And you start out with, mobilizing. Hey, I'm going to be at city council this week talking about, why are we paying $250,000 for a shot spotter system that doesn't work? We've had all these conversations about how we're overfunding the police. Can you come out and lend your voice and fill the room, right? And then as time goes on, you can make these bigger asks like, hey, I need help phone banking for this. Can you do that, right? And you can use the long-term relationships are key to getting those yeses when you make the asks. It's a hard thing. We're actually working on trying to figure out how to, put a good guide on deep canvassing out. Because it's one of those things that it's not the political mainstream. It's not how things are done right now, so the resources aren't as much there.